There's an interesting story going on at the moment with Henry Staunton, who was the person sacked as chairman of the Post Office last month by Kemi Badenoch. He gave an interview today to the Sunday Times, or yesterday anyway, it was printed today. And in it, he claims he was told that the government wanted to limp into the election without having to pay a huge bill to the postmasters and postmistresses who have been so cheated by the system for so many years. Now, Staunton says the process to compensate and exonerate victims was going absolutely nowhere until the television series Mr. Bates versus the Post Office over the new year, at which point, quote, the dam burst, the dam broke. And there's a series of people with question marks over their names, including Paul of Venables, and yet it seems to be this particular man who takes the rap. And I think he's not prepared to do so lying down. He was told someone has to take the rap. Anyway, Kemi Badenoch has now hit back and said that this is all deeply untrue. She says that the claims made by Henry Staunton are wrong. The idea that someone's got to take the rap, that she said this, is wrong. She says that the idea that the government wants to limp into an election with as much money as it can get its hands on is wrong. She says it's a disgraceful misrepresentation of their conversation. But instead of saying what they actually said, she says they're going to wait until tomorrow and then they will come up with a response. Well, if she's so certain that what Mr. Staunton said is absolutely wrong and a disgraceful misrepresentation of the conversation, then I would have thought she's in a position to actually say exactly what that conversation was. Instead, she's going off to her office to concoct some sort of lies, presumably, to wriggle out of the political fallout of being exposed once again as an extraordinarily unreliable government. Now, of course, it could be that she's telling the truth. It could be that Henry Staunton is a liar and a cheat. One of them is, and the people who are the victims in this are, of course, the postmasters and the postmistresses. So presumably from tomorrow they're going to get paid. And they're going to get paid post-haste. That's a good expression. It comes from the days when the post office was reliable. And Mr. Staunton told the paper, early on I was told by a fairly senior person to stall on spend on compensation and on the replacement of Horizon and to limp, in quotation marks, I did a file note on it, limp into the election. He's quite precise. If this is a lie, it's an extraordinary lie. It was not an anti-postmaster thing. It was just straight financials. I didn't ask because I said I'm having no part of it. I'm not here to limp into the election. It's not the right thing to do by postmasters. So there we are. He didn't want to do what they said. Therefore, presumably, his argument is that he effectively resigned. Far from taking the rap, says Kemi Badenoch, she dismissed Staunton due to very serious allegations about his conduct while chair of the Post Office, including blocking an investigation into that conduct. She's making quite serious accusations there. Henry Staunton had a lack of grip getting justice for postmasters. The serious concerns over his conduct were the reasons I asked him to step down. But surely everybody that's had anything to do with the Post Office for about 20 years has had a lack of grip getting justice for postmasters. She said the conversation with him was carried out with officials and they took a complete record. A statement will be made tomorrow telling the truth. Oh dear. Oh dear. And the government has sped up compensation to victims and consistently encouraged postmasters to come forward with their claims. I don't think that's entirely true. And that's, we don't know who said that. That's a spokesman for the government. So the only thing we know about that is the person's gender, which is not a terribly important thing to be told. But the person went on to suggest any actions or conversations happened to the contrary is incorrect. In fact, upon appointment, Mr. Staunton was set to concrete objectives in writing to focus on reaching settlements with claimants, clear evidence of the government's intent. Of course, the whole problem with the government's intent is that they don't want to draw a distinction between repaying the money which was stolen by the post office from the postmasters and the postmistresses and providing compensation as well. They want the whole thing to be lumped into one concept, which they're calling compensation. But a lot of the money which is due to the postmasters is simply the return of the money stolen, which presumably would be returned with interest. And that needs to be made clear. I think there's a lot of work to be done in the government, or in the next government, which I presume will address this issue with some integrity, about the whole concept of whistleblowers and people who have suffered as victims of official bureaucracy. Because when people blow whistles, when people are whistleblowers, as I've discovered from talking to people, particularly in the NHS, they are victimized and hounded, and it seems that the entire system concocts some sort of bureaucratic fiddle so that they are left in limbo, and the system itself rolls over to try its very best to defend itself. It doesn't try and reform, it tries to hide the evidence or squash the whistleblowers. In fact, the NHS has entire departments dedicated to whistleblowing, entire departments dedicated to dealing with whistleblowers, because you can't possibly, let's say as a surgeon, be in the middle of serious operations if your mind is on the fact that you are being bullied because you have just reported a wrong in the system. Your hand might slip because you are bullied. You're deeply stressed because you are bullied. So the system is there to try and stop that. The system is there specifically. Somebody who is whistleblowing is at risk. Their health is at risk. Their blood pressure goes up. Their concentration disappears. Because they have put themselves out to right a wrong, and the system potentially gears up and gangs up on them. So any form of whistleblowing automatically should trigger a system to protect the whistleblowers, so they protect lives. In the end, whistleblowing comes down to protecting lives in the NHS. And yet, the number of stories that I have heard, and I'm not in the NHS, the number of stories that I have heard recently of NHS whistleblowers, of middle management that decides it doesn't like somebody, and the sort of pressure that is placed on these people is diabolical. That's the NHS. Same thing is in education. The same thing is in the police force. The same thing runs through the post office scandal. The bureaucrats, the middle management, are more interested in suppressing criticism than they are in reforming their departments. So when you have that concept in mind, and then you read what Kemi Badenoch says about this man Staunton, she doesn't actually give us any details. She just conforms to the general principle that stopping criticism is more important than anything else. Destroying the critic is more important than learning, is more important than doing the right thing. I'm really, really shocked, and I cannot believe that the Times printed something which hadn't been double-checked.